9 spine-chilling Costco night shift horrors. What was really hidden in the aisles? The clock struck 11 as Michelle slid her ID badge across the scanner, stepping into the hollowed halls of Costco. It was a place once filled with laughter and camaraderie, but now its darkened aisles were a battleground against fatigue. Every thunderous clang echoed off the warehouse walls as she restocked shelves, memories of her children's laughter far away. However, tonight the air felt different, heavy, thick with something unspeakable lurking just out of sight. A sharp clang reverberated from the frozen food aisle, a sound so out of place that her heart rattled against her ribcage. She paused, straining to decipher the cacophony in the oppressive silence. Was it just fatigue playing tricks on her mind? She shook her head, forcing herself to ignore the creeping dread that slithered down her spine. Back to work, she thought. As she pushed a cart of frozen pizzas, a whisper brushed against her ear, sending chills cascading down her arms. Help! The sound was almost lost in an inky shadow that danced just beyond the aisle. Who was there? Gradually, dread settled over the staff like a shroud, their laughter replaced by furtive glances and urgent whispers. Each shift amplified the sensation of being watched, magnified by the sudden disappearance of Derek, the warehouse's beloved stock clerk. The manager, a man whose erratic behavior was as unsettling as the shadows themselves, tightened his grip on them all, planting seeds of paranoia with each interaction. And she couldn't shake the stories the townsfolk who vanished, whispers of the forgotten, the entity rumored to collect secrets, and silence cries for help. She felt it gnawing at her, like a parasite burrowing into her daily existence. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. On a stormy night, as rain lashed against the roof like frantic fingernails, she stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping wedged between dusty boxes. The headline screamed of disappearances, pictures of smiling faces that twisted her stomach with dread. The familiar cheekbones of her manager glared back, eyes that had sparked fear but now appeared almost lifeless in the dim light. It hit her then, an unfathomable connection she had once dismissed as a figment of her imagination. Her late-night shifts grew increasingly perilous, each minor mishap morphing into something more sinister. Footsteps sounded behind her, too deliberate to be her own. Each time she turned, the aisles emptied, fooled into complacency by mere shadows. With no help from an indifferent security team, her every instinct urged her to prepare for the unthinkable. Tension gripped her as dread spiraled into grasping fingers of terror. Tonight felt different, charged with a lurking presence. As she peered into the refrigerator door, a fleeting shadow darted past the stacked goods, whispering a warning only she could hear. Breath quickened, pulse pounded, the hollow stare of an unfamiliar face greeted her. In that moment of piercing fear, Michelle realized she was no longer alone in the store. With her children's safety hanging like a fragile thread, what would she do? Confront the malevolence or flee this nightmare labyrinth forever? The glass door shuddered against the icy shelves, and Michelle stepped back, heart racing. The face had vanished, but the echo of its piercing gaze threatened to swallow her whole. Sweat beaded at her temples, but she fought the urge to flee. Panic clawed at her throat, demanding action. Get yourself together, Michelle, she whispered to herself. Focus. The anchored chatter of her colleagues echoed in her thoughts. Each laugh shared during brighter days felt like a distant memory. Tonight held only whispers and shadows, secrets gnawing at the fringe of her sanity. Tentatively, she advanced down the aisle, gripping her restocked cart like a shield. She pretended to check the prices of the ice cream, stalling for composure, when a loud crash erupted from the back. The frozen pizzas danced in her cart as she stumbled. She steadied herself, a desperate urge to look what had made that sound. Before she could process it further, a flicker of movement darted at the periphery of her vision. Instinctively, she turned to face it, adrenaline flooding her veins. Nothing. The brimming darkness consumed all, but that creeping urge to run or confront gnawed sharply at her choices. "I can do this," she murmured. "I can make it to the front." With every step, her mind screamed for escape. She approached the next aisle when a low, guttural growl resonated behind her, sending her into a paralyzing freeze. Breath caught in her lungs, she wheeled around, heart hammering against her ribs, echoing like thunder. "Who's there?" she demanded, a hollowness in her voice revealing her fear. Silence engulfed her, but the air vibrated with malevolence. A shadow glided between the shelves, too swift to secure an identity. A chill swept through the store, winding around her like a serpent tightening its grip. Time clawed at her, stretching into an eternity before she broke. She sprinted through the aisles, the familiar products blurring into a nightmare landscape. The neon lights overhead buzzed ominously, flickering with each desperate stride. She could still hear the growl, echoing like a pulse, relentless and hungry. Michelle ducked into an empty aisle, hiding between boxes of detergent. The stench of stale air weighed heavily as she pressed her back against cool metal, listening intently. All she could hear was her frantic heartbeat. Then, silence, an unsettling kind of silence. Lightheaded, she dared to peer out. It was then she saw him, the manager, standing eerily still at the end of the aisle. His silhouette caught the dim light, casting long shadows that appeared far too distorted. His eyes, once filled with madness and malice, now shone with an unnatural glint. "Michelle," his voice oozed like thick syrup, crawling through the air. "You shouldn't be out here." A surge of terror jolted her. He knew what she had seen. He was part of it. "Stay back!" she shouted, heart pounding loud enough to drown out reason. He chuckled, a sound that brushed against her nerves like icy fingers. "You've only just begun to unravel the truth." In that moment, the lights flickered. A sudden burst illuminated his face, twisted with a wicked smile. That face no longer felt human, more a mask, an extension of the dark things lurking. With no time to lose, Michelle bolted from her hiding place, the aisles morphing into a maze of confusion. She clutched her cart, dodging flying products as chaos erupted. The sirens of despair howled in the background. Would she escape, or would she join the forgotten souls trapped here? As the manager's footsteps thundered closer, she reached the entrance, her escape. But as she grasped the door handle, a chilling realization washed over her. The door swung wide open, not to the outside world, but to a swirling void, an abyss that beckoned her and what lay beyond. Would she succumb to the darkness, or find a way to reclaim her life? The void swallowed her senses, pulling her deeper into shadows that twisted and writhed. Michelle stumbled back, terror replacing her urge to rush forward. The darkness at the door pulsed like a living thing, drawing her gaze as it whispered unspeakable secrets. "No, no!" She tore her eyes away and raced down the aisle, gasping for breath. The familiar shelves now felt alien, transformed by her dread. She ducked into a side aisle, pressing her shaking body against the wall, channeling every ounce of strength into staying silent. Footsteps reverberated through the store, slow and deliberate, like a predator sensing its prey. The guttural growl, chilling yet distant, filled the air. It was getting closer. A can rolled off a shelf nearby, clattering loudly on the floor. Michelle winced, a wave of ice washing over her. Would it be enough to draw attention? Was her heartbeat muffled under the thunderous sound of that growl? She squeezed her eyes shut, cursing her own body for its betrayal. "Please just leave," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. A shadow flickered, creeping along the aisle, and she strained to listen, heart pounding wildly in her chest. The manager's voice floated through the darkness, rasping like dry leaves. "You think you can hide? You think you can run? There's no escape," his voice echoed, bouncing off the walls until it felt like the store itself was mocking her fears. Michelle's mind spun as she mentally mapped her options. She had to find a way out. The massive glass windows at the front, the emergency door at the back, both could be dead ends. She needed a distraction. Just as the footsteps drew near, her phone vibrated violently in her pocket, startling her. She almost yelped but stifled the sound, heart racing at the sudden shock. Peeking out, She saw the manager moving closer, his shape a monstrous silhouette against the flickering overhead lights. "Stop it!" she hissed at her phone. The screen lit up, displaying a notification. It was a text, the last message from her best friend, asking if she was okay. The tiny screen felt like a beacon of sanity, a moment of connection in overwhelming panic. With quick fingers, she replied, "Help! I'm trapped!" Then, she glanced around, desperation rising. The canned food aisle. If she could knock over some products, maybe it would create enough noise to distract him. Gathering her resolve, she darted to the next aisle, bracing herself. Her body screamed for rest, but she couldn't stop now. She crouched low, her breath quieting as she surveyed the rows of canned goods. Gritting her teeth, she shoved hard against the tower of cans. They tumbled down, metal colliding with metal, ringing out like an alarm. The noise echoed in the oppressive silence. The manager paused, surprise flickering across his sinister face before he turned toward the ruckus. Relief washed over Michelle, if only for a moment. She darted toward the front of the store, urging her legs to move against the heavy weight of dread. But then the whispered chant began. It rose in intensity, growing louder with each step she took. "Join us, join us, join us!" Panic gripped her as the shadows shifted around her. Figures emerged, slightly formed but void of clear features, and they were heading her way. It dawned on her, they were the lost souls, trapped, drawn here just like her. Eyes wide, she exchanged fleeting glances with them, recognizing a shared terror. They reached out, fingers curling, whispering her name. "Michelle, stay back!" she yelled, sprinting faster. But their grasp was overwhelming, a tidal pull toward fate that loomed ahead. She was nearing the glass doors when something cold and clawed wrapped around her ankle, the eerie manager following closely behind. Everything spiraled as she felt herself being yanked back. The darkness swirled around her again, the once muted growl now a ravenous roar. Would she be devoured by this nightmare, joining the endless echoes of despair, or find a way into the light? Suddenly, she glimpsed a flicker of movement in the shadows, someone brightening the darkness. Was she saved, or was it another cruel twist of the night? Michelle could feel the grip loosen slightly, just enough to allow a glimmer of hope as she scrambled toward that faint glimmer. But as she moved closer, reality shattered and the truth behind the manager was about to be revealed. The pull of darkness slackened, but just for a moment. Michelle lunged toward the light, exhilaration rushing through her veins. But as she stepped closer, the figure materialized, revealing a face she never expected to see, a distorted reflection of herself, twisted in terror. "Michelle," it rasped, voice like jagged glass. "You mustn't." Before she could process the horror of it, the ground shifted beneath her feet. The tiles seemed to melt away, forcing her into an abyss of swirling black. Gripping her arms, the shadowy figure of herself pulled, the whispers intensifying, drowning out her thoughts. "Join us, it's too late, no!" she cried, wrenching free with all her strength, tumbling back into the aisle. Frantic, she twisted on the floor, crawling away from the uncanny image. The shadows howled around her, every cry echoing with despair. Hazily, she glanced back toward the store entrance. The glass doors flickered like a mirage, tantalizing but distant. The manager's presence loomed behind her, his clawed hands still gripping the air where she had been. His eyes burned with an insatiable hunger, teeth bared in a grotesque smile that twisted the reality of her childhood nightmares. "Run, Michelle!" Her own voice echoed in her head, urging her on even as the figure of herself continued to howl. She scrambled upright, lunging toward the exit. A shadow intercepted her, blocking her path. The manager stepped forward, his form shifting, as if bending the light around him until it shattered into 1,000 shards. "You think you can escape?" he snarled, breath stinking of decay. Her breath quickened, heart pounding against her ribcage. She darted to the side, swerving around stacked displays, yanking open nearby doors. Each room felt hazardous: frozen food sections, funeral memorials, mockery of Christmas lights dangling lifelessly overhead. The store pulsed with an alien life. Suddenly, a thought struck her: she needed to confront him. The fear coursing through her was potent, but it could be directed. She turned to face him, bracing herself. "What do you want?" she shouted. "Why are you doing this?" He stepped closer, voice smooth but chilling. "To collect what is owed the forgotten must be embraced." As he spoke, the other figures drew nearer, silently pushing in from the aisles. She could feel their despair coating the air like a fog. Michelle's heart raced, scanning the room for anything that could help. Her eyes settled on a nearby shelf, its items carelessly strewn about, sharp cans, heavy boxes. If she could harness the chaos, maybe she could turn the tide. With all her might, she threw a jar. It shattered in a violent explosion of glass, scattering as it hit the ground. The manager flinched, momentarily blinded by the sparkling shards. The other shadowed souls paused, confusion flickering across their hollow expressions. "Go!" she urged, her voice rising. It wasn't just a command, it was a rallying cry. For a brief moment, their grasp on her loosened as uncertainty filled the void. Taking advantage, she dashed through a narrow gap. The air felt colder, clinging desperately to her skin as she sprinted past the bodies that faded into mere echoes behind her. Every step drove her closer to the exit. But the manager was relentless, rage billowing like a storm behind her. "You can't escape the past, Michelle. You belong with us." Then, just as she neared the exit, the flickering lights overhead began to pulse, darkness spilling into the store like a flood. Something icy began to crawl up her legs, a warning that she was out of time. Just as she burst through the threshold of daylight, a cold hand wrapped around her wrist. "You're not leaving!" Michelle screamed, feeling the edges of reality tear once more. The ground shook, and the last thing she saw was his sinister grin before the shadows reclaimed her. Darkness enveloped her once again, but this time, she was not alone. Would she finally break free or be consumed by a darkness even deeper than before? The darkness was suffocating, wrapping around her like a wet blanket, heavy and cloying. Michelle gasped for breath, trying to shake the fear that gripped her heart. The cold hand that had caught her was gone, but she could still feel its chill lingering on her skin, a reminder of the danger now lurking only moments away. Voices whispered around her, hushed tones seeping into her mind, clawing at her sanity. It was her own voice mingled with others, trapped souls echoing in a cacophony of despair. "Join us," they moaned, each syllable heavy with longing and loss. Michelle stumbled forward, the ground beneath her shifting like quicksand. Each step felt like wading through thick, murky water, dragging her back into the consuming dark. Panic surged in her chest, and her breaths quickened. She fought against the pull, determined not to let it swallow her whole. "Think, Michelle!" she muttered to herself, squeezing her eyes shut as if that would block out the ghastly images dancing just beyond her vision. She needed to remember. There had to be a way out, something she could grasp that wasn't twisted like the shadowy reflections that haunted her. Suddenly, a light flickered in the distance. It was weak, a desperate glimmer fighting for survival against the oppressive night. Heart racing, she pressed on, the voices rising around her, calling her name, begging her to turn back. "Stay with us," they cried. "You belong here." But she didn't belong. Not here, not like this. "No!" she shouted, her voice echoing starkly against the silence. She wasn't ready to give up. Not to darkness, not to despair. As she neared the light, it expanded, revealing a long, deserted aisle. The shelves were laden with familiar goods, snacks, drinks, mundane items, but there was an uncanny stillness to them. She reached out to touch a box of cereal but recoiled at the dry, crackling sound it made under her fingers, as if something restless was locked inside. "Just keep moving," she urged herself, adrenaline coursing through her again as she sprinted down the aisle. The light flickered above, illuminating the path ahead and casting unsettling shadows behind her. Every breath echoed in the hollow space, every footstep a drumbeat of impending dread. From the far end of the aisle, a figure stepped into the light, tall and gaunt. It stood motionless, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, a grotesque smile stretching across its face. Michelle's blood ran cold. The manager, or another version of him, she could not tell, but it didn't matter. "Turn back," it rasped, voice echoing like the crack of thunder. There's nothing but suffering ahead. Michelle felt her heart race. Was it a warning or a lure? Driven by instinct, she took another step forward, steeling herself against the fear creeping up her spine. "What do you want from me?" she screamed, fighting to be heard over the rising chorus of disembodied voices. "Your soul," it whispered, breath chilling the air around her. "You owe us." She grit her teeth, pushing against the overwhelming tide of fear washing over her. This was her moment to define herself against the darkness, to take back what was rightfully hers. In a burst of clarity, she launched herself at the figure, a wild desperation guiding her actions. She could sense the shadows around her beginning to wane, their grip loosening as she fought against their desires. The pale light intensified, illuminating hidden passages in the aisles, openings that whispered promises of freedom. But the figure rebuffed her, a hand shooting out like a shadowy claw, and before she could register what was happening, she was yanked back. "You'll pay for your insolence." The chill enveloped her. She was sucked into a void where echoes of lost souls seemed to swirl endlessly. Vision blurred and sensations faded, the last remnants of light flickering out like a dying star. Would she find the strength to confront her fears, or was she doomed to become just another whisper in the darkness? Michelle crashed against an invisible wall, her body thudding against the cold, hard surface. Panic washed over her, drowning out the whispers that were more like a chant, now an insistent pull that beckoned her deeper into the void. She scrambled to her feet, heart pounding, eyes darting about wildly for any sign of escape. "Focus!" she yelled, desperation saturating her voice. But the only reply came from the shadows, swirling around her, pulsating, a living entity with dark intentions. Join us," the voices echoed, sending shivers scurrying down her spine. In the suffocating darkness, she remembered snippets of her life, carefree days in sunlight, laughter with friends, moments she was desperate to cling to. But the shadows mocked her, their warped faces flickering in and out of existence. They wanted her. No, they needed her. "Not today!" she screamed, surprising even herself. Fueled by adrenaline, she forced her feet to move, charging through the expanse that felt like a labyrinth of horrors. A flicker of light caught her attention, the entrance to a side aisle, barely illuminated but promising freedom. Just as she reached it, a hand, slimy and cold, wrapped around her wrist. "You can't leave," the voice hissed, dripping with malice. Michelle yanked her arm away, tasting bile in the back of her throat, and collapsed into the aisle, rolling on the floor. She looked up to see another figure, this one even more grotesque than the last. It emerged from the shadows, a faceless mass clad in tattered clothing. It beckoned her with bony fingers, the air around it thick with despair. Stay forever, the oppressive weight of the darkness pressed in again, suffocating her. She was losing herself, the light at the end of the tunnel flickering like a fragile flame threatening to blow out. A wave of despair washed over her, dragging her down into a pit of hopelessness. But then, a memory vivid and powerful snapped back into focus. Her grandmother's voice, soothing yet firm: "Never give in to fear, Michelle. The moment you let it in, it takes control." Fueled by determination, she leaped to her feet, pushing against the shadows, muscles tense with effort. The corridor seemed to shift, the flickering lights beginning to illuminate strange symbols on the walls, marks of the lost souls. Each step she took echoed louder, reverberating through the silence, striking against the layers of darkness. "Leave her be!" a voice shouted. This time, it didn't belong to the shadows, but to a figure that emerged at the far end of the aisle. He stood there, imposing and resolute, his face half-lit in the dim glow. "You have no power here." The gaunt apparition turned, and in that moment of distraction, Michelle seized her chance, darting past them, heart racing. She needed out. But the store was alive now, shelves shifted as if the very foundation of reality twisted around her. "Run, Michelle! Don't stop!" The figure from the end of the aisle urged, his eyes filled with a fierce glow. She didn't know who he was, but desperation fueled her legs. She sprinted forward, dodging shelves that now seemed to bend towards her, hungry to swallow her whole. But as she approached the exit, her breath hitching in her throat, the realization hit her. This was too easy. With a final glance over her shoulder, she saw the shadows converge, merging into a monstrous mass, a howling chorus of rage and despair. The door stood ajar, beckoning her with open arms. She could feel the welcoming coolness on the other side, but fear clutched her heart. What if it was a trap, a way to ensnare her in another guise? Her instincts screamed at her to run, but uncertainty gnawed at her mind. Would sprawling chaos on the other side be better than this consuming void? Then, without thinking, she grasped the door and pushed. As she stepped into the glaring light, the shadows recoiled, howling in anger. A scream erupted behind her as she crossed the threshold, and for a fleeting moment, Michelle thought she had escaped, but when she turned around, the world was starkly different. The aisles shimmered with unsettling familiarity. Hidden in plain sight were the faces she recognized, hollow and lifeless. Now, she realized, the darkness wanted her to join them. "What have you done?" A voice echoed from behind her, a voice she knew all too well. "Michelle, you're one of us now." As terror sank deep into her bones, she felt the icy grip of shadows closing in again. What had she unleashed? Was there truly no escape? And then, she saw the truth of it all. What had she become? The store was different now. Familiar in a way that chilled Michelle to her core. The bright lights flickered, casting unsettling shadows on the floor where the lifeless faces lingered, their eyes void of hope. Each one bore a resemblance to someone she once knew. Friends, family, even strangers she passed in the grocery aisle. All of them trapped in a cruel parody of life. "What have you done?" The voice echoed in her head, sharp and taunting. It was that of her best friend, Lily, who had gone missing months ago. Michelle's heart sank as the image of Lily flickered into view, her once bright spirit now snuffed out, replaced by an expression that mirrored despair. "Join us," the chorus rose again, this time more insistent. The hollow faces drifted closer, their mouths twisted into eerie smiles. She could almost feel the pull from their vacant stares, drawing her into their eternal misery. "No!" she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. "I want to become like you." But as Michelle turned to run, the air in the store thickened, each breath pulling her deeper into the chorus of despair. The aisles began to shift again, a maze of darkness closing in around her. She could hear the whispers now, not just from the shadows, but reverberating within her mind, filling it with impossibly dark thoughts. "Let go, Michelle. You're one of us now." Each word was rippling through her body, and she pressed her hands over her ears to block them out. But it was futile. The voices seeped into her skin, curling like tendrils around her heart, filling her with dread. She stumbled, feeling the ground tilt beneath her as if the very store was shifting to trap her soul. Suddenly, the figure at the end of the aisle reappeared, his face partially obscured but radiating a strange, warm glow that contrasted with the creeping cold around her. "Fight it, Michelle. You're stronger than they think." "Who are you?" she gasped, desperate for answers as she dragged her feet toward his light. "I'm a guardian of sorts," he replied, urgency gleaming in his eyes. "The darkness feeds on fear and despair. You must find a way to extinguish it before it consumes you." His words sparked a flicker of hope within her, but it was quickly snuffed out by the cold grasp of despair. The shadows around her twisted tighter, threatening to pull her under. How do I escape?" she cried out, desperation engulfing her once more. The figure pointed toward the far shelves, stacked with familiar products from her old life. "Find your truth amidst the lies. It's the key to breaking the cycle." Her heart raced as she took a tentative step towards the shelves, each movement seeming to slow in the suffocating darkness. Her hand grasped a box of frozen pizza, nearly mocking in its normalcy. But the moment she touched it, the shadows howled, angry and desperate. "No! You don't belong here. Everything I loved is tainted by this darkness." Michelle screamed defiantly, her voice echoing out into the void. "You took them away, and now you want me too." The shadows writhed in rage, the faces drawing closer, their expressions morphing into grotesque masks of fury. But within the chaos, buried in her panic, Michelle felt a small seed of defiance growing. "I refuse to be one of you. With renewed strength, she ripped the box apart, watching as the shadows shrank back, their forms flickering and displaced. Something within her flickered too, ignited by her resolve. But the darkness wasn't finished. It surged forward, spilling into the aisles like a tidal wave, aiming to swallow her whole. In that split second, she realized the truth was right in front of her, buried beneath layers of fear. What if the key wasn't just fighting? What if accepting parts of her own darkness was the only way to turn the tide? As the shadows closed in, she took a deep breath, ready to embrace that truth, whatever it may bring. Then, a sudden crack echoed through the aisles, splitting the air like shattering glass. What did that sound mean? Had she made the right choice, or would it spell her doom? What would come next in this battle of light versus darkness? A deafening silence engulfed the store following the shattering crack. Michelle's heart pounded, wild and erratic in her chest. Would the sound bring the impending dark wave crashing down upon her, or would it unearth something lurking beneath the surface? The aisles stood frozen, suspended in an eerie stillness. Shadows loomed large, uncertain and twisted, their faces now flickering like a candle fighting against the wind. Desperation seeped into every corner of her soul, yet a strange calm washed over her. Maybe acceptance was her way out, or maybe it would seal her fate. With a determined breath, she reached for the shattered remains of the pizza box scattered on the floor. The fragmented pieces glinted in the flickering lights, revealing an inscription beneath the cell phone sensing wax coating. Breathless, she traced the grooves with her fingers. "Face your fears," the words whispered, imbued with a forgotten energy that felt like a lifeline. "Face them?" she repeated softly, echoing the faint feeling of hope blooming cautiously within. But the chorus of lost souls answered back, their hunger only growing. "You cannot escape us, Michelle, we are your fears." She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to meet their gaze. Each face molded into a disfigured mask of her anxieties, doubts, regrets, and the very grief that had clawed at her every night. "I am not you!" she screamed, her voice reverberating against the walls, disdainfully echoing her pain back at her. Positioning herself squarely amidst the encroaching tide, she focused on the corners of her mind where blaring fears hid. Her mother's illness, the weight of responsibility, the guilt of inaction. They rose from the depths like shadows in the flickering light. But instead of recoiling, she planted her feet and embraced them. With every dark thought that pulled at her, she countered with a light of defiance, forcing her fears to face her head-on, illuminating the darkness that threatened to suffocate her. "I accept you. You're part of my story, but you won't write my ending." To her surprise, the shadows hesitated. A peculiar wavering spark glimmered in their hollow eyes. Curiosity replaced the raw hunger, and she felt the warmth of the Guardian's presence radiate beside her, emboldening her resolve. "Do not waver. The truth is your weapon," he urged. But suddenly, the ground quaked beneath her, breaking the fragile standoff. Shelves began to topple. Cans and bottles crashed to the floor with a resonating clang, sending bursts of color spilling out before her, a riot against the encroaching bleakness. "Now, Michelle! Strike them down!" With a trembling but fierce hand, she swept her fingers through the air, an invisible sword, cutting through layers of despair. Shadows shrieked as if the light had blinded them, their forms scattering like brittle leaves in a tempest. The Guardian smiled, and her heart lifted. Maybe this could work. But as the shadows retreated, an undercurrent of dread whispered like a chilling breeze. The aisles began to warp and twist, an abyss stretching to swallow her hope whole. Then, she felt it. A cold hand gripping her ankle, pulling her into the void. Panic surged through her veins, and she yanked her foot back. "No!" she gasped, but the shadows had gathered strength again. They clawed at her with void-like desperation, their wails harmonizing into a sinister symphony. "Join us, Michelle! You can't resist forever!" Pain shot through her heart, but she tightened her resolve. She would not be a pawn in their game. Even as the darkness closed in, even as her courage wavered, a fierce flame ignited within. The truth had a weight of defiance she could wield. She looked toward the figure of the Guardian, standing firm against the onslaught. "What do I do?" What do I do? But his mouth gaped open, and from behind him, a sight froze her in disbelief. There, woven like a tapestry of despair, were the faces of every person she had lost. They stared back, pleading with her from the shadows, yet illuminating the path ahead. Would facing them condemn her or set her free? As the wave of darkness surged, Michelle knew she had seconds to decide. Could she confront the shadows of her past, or would she be consumed by them? Time slowed. The shadows clawed desperately around Michelle's ankles, slick and cold, pulling her deeper into their suffocating embrace. Their wails echoed darkly, a haunting lullaby intent on dragging her into despair. She felt that icy grip tightening, her breath hitching as the faces behind the guardians shimmered, wisps of memory shaping themselves from sorrow. Face them. The guardian's voice rang true, cutting through the din of despair. You must see them for what they are. Her mind raced. Memories flooded back, grief and love intertwined. Her mother, frail and tethered to life by machines, begging her to let go while crying, "You need to live." The summer heat clung to them like a warm hug, now twisted into a suffocating shroud. Would facing that heart-wrenching moment be her salvation or the abyss? Do I have to? Michelle uttered through clenched teeth, collecting fragments of courage into the flickering shadows of her heart. Face them, Michelle. The guardian's voice swelled with strength, urging her forward. With a sudden resolution, she yanked her foot free. She could feel the tendrils of darkness retreating, even if just for a moment. Mustering her strength, she turned to meet her past. Is that really you? She shouted, voice shaking but raw with defiance. The figures of her lost loved ones solidified, no longer mere specters drenched in shadows. They wore expressions of sorrow mixed with love, eyes glinting with unspoken words, full of understanding. In that agonizing moment, Michelle took a step forward, allowing her own sorrow to merge with theirs. "Mom!" she cried, reaching out, feeling warmth flicker in her chest. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in anger and fear like a storm roused by sudden light. "Do not carry this burden. It is not yours to bear." Her mother's voice echoed, clear and comforting, slicing through the noise. "We are here, and we love you still." Then came the truth, crashing down every regret, every unexpressed feeling, igniting within her. Michelle straightened. They were not just echoes haunting her, they were pieces of her foundation, love anchored in loss. "I'm sorry!" She wept but then steeled herself. "I will never forget you." In that clarity, despair shifted. Light radiated through her, bursting like stars in the night sky, a force so potent the shadows convulsed, writhing as if physically wounded. "Your truth is your power," the guardian shouted, now shining as bright as a beacon. "Harness it." She raised her arms. Blue energy swirled forth, crackling, bathing the twilight in radiant illumination. The shadows shrieked louder, their forms dissolving in the glare, retreating like the morning mist. But just then, something darker loomed beyond the light, a presence colder than anything else she had faced. Eyes wide, Michelle realized the shadows were merely a reflection of the real terror lurking behind them. A monstrous howl erupted, echoing off the store walls. "You think you can escape?" The walls shuddered, and cracks snaked through the aisles like venomous vines, revealing oozing blackness that seemed alive, hungry. "No!" she cried, panic seeping back in. The dismal space was warping, threatening to swallow them whole. "Run!" The guardian's commands were urgent, yet calm, pulling at her as the darkness deepened. For the first time, Michelle ran, legs pumping, heart racing. Her body felt heavy with the weight of her memories, but the fear of that monstrous presence propelled her forward. Yet she could still feel it behind her, alive, watching her escape with predatory interest. What was this horrific new shadow that had emerged? Could she outrun it, or would it consume her? Michelle sprinted past familiar aisles, her breath hitching in her throat, the shadow behind her breathing down her neck. Those hollow eyes, filled with malevolence, urged her to falter. But she could not. Her loved one's echoes rang louder than the beast chasing her. "You're not alone," they urged. "Fight." With renewed determination, she veered toward the electronics section, seeking a refuge. The once safe products transformed into barricades, stacks of boxes became walls. Sweat dripped down her brow, but she kept pushing, refusing to look back, refusing to embrace the darkness threatening to swallow her whole. The lurking shadow rumbled, a growl reverberating off the metal racks, making her pause just long enough for it to catch up, for its cold tendrils to slither around her ankles. She fought against it, her will ignited. "Get off me!" she screamed, summoning every ounce of strength and belief she could muster within her. Her resolve flared like wildfire, engulfing the shadows constricting her limbs. Together with the visceral power of her truth, she sent spirals of shimmering light cascading from her arms and exploding against the dark tendrils, forcing them to release her. She kicked off the remnants of despair and propelled herself away from the confrontational darkness, heart racing as she made her way through the store. Charging forward, she neared the checkout area. It radiated a soft glow, a promise of escape. Remembering where the Guardian had pointed her before, she gathered her surroundings: a sloped surface, a raised counter, movement beyond a flickering glow. "Michelle! Over here!" The Guardian appeared again, gesturing wildly. Determinedly, she lunged toward him, shielded by that flare of energy now swirling around her like a protective cocoon. The beast roared behind her and, instinctively, she turned for just a moment. What she saw churned her stomach. It had morphed, an embodiment of every fear she had ever known: doubt, failure, the crippling need for acceptance. "No!" she gasped, shaking her head. "Focus!" the Guardian shouted, grounding her. "Use the light!" With all the force within her, channeling her emotions that were rooted deep in love, strength, and hope, she unleashed a wave of shimmering power. The air pulsed with energy as she faced the monster, confronting not just its form but all it embodied. "Remember who you are!" she shouted, the lights pulsating in rhythm with her heartbeat, echoing the memory of her mother's gentle smile, her children's laughter, all intertwining into a powerful force that crackled around her. The shadow recoiled, furious and twisted, yet that terrifying form quickly began to dissolve under the luminous tide bursting from within her. "No! You cannot take her! She will not join you!" the Guardian roared, and together their forces combined into a radiant blast of light. Michelle felt it surge through her, splintering the darkness further, peeling back layers of despair that surrounded her. The store shook, the entire structure reverberating with their combined power. She pressed forward, feeling the warmth of light reaching beyond the shadows. "Now!" the Guardian yelled. With every last ounce of strength, she threw her arms wide, directing the fierce beam of energy toward the lurking shadow. "You have no power here! I'm not afraid of you anymore!" The shadow screamed, an agonized sound that pierced through the oppressive atmosphere, as it shattered into a million fragments, scattering like ash far into the infinite dark. In that stunning moment of liberation, the fluorescent lights above blazed brightly, dispelling the encroaching void and illuminating the aisles around her. The faces of lost souls flickered, then began to fade away, freed from the entity that had anchored them into darkness. And suddenly, the store transformed. The shelves returned to their mundane splendor, products gleaming like jewels in the artificial light. The air felt lighter, charged with newfound hope. "Is it over?" Michelle breathed, disbelief washing over her as she glanced around, heart still racing. The Guardian nodded, a faint smile crossing his worn features. "You are free now, but remember, darkness lives in the absence of light. Stay strong against your fears." Tears streamed down her cheeks, a relief washing over her as she felt the weight of despair lifting, as if the burdens of her past no longer mattered. "I will," she promised, her heart finally steadying. As she approached the entrance, the doors swung open, revealing the calm night sky beyond, stars twinkling like promises in the distance. Freedom! The thought made her feel giddy. She stepped outside, inhaling the fresh night air, feeling the coolness kiss her skin. The distant sound of laughter brought memories of joy rushing back. "Mom," Lily Michelle whispered, looking up at the starlit sky, whispering prayers of gratitude to the universe for her escape. With her children's laughter echoing in her mind, she felt lighter, ready to embrace a future unfettered by the darkness that had tried to claim her. Finally, she could move forward. She took a deep breath, the world around her vibrant and alive. Her journey of fear was behind her, but the promise of hope lay ahead. Now it was time to live again. Time to cherish every moment. And as she walked into the night, surrounded by shimmering stars, she felt fiercely alive, connected to everyone who had ever loved her and who she loved in return. This was her life unlocked, unrestrained, and bathed in light. If you enjoyed this wild journey of horror and hope, now is the time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories that will leave you breathless. Smash that like button now to broadcast our story far and wide, feeding the algorithm that keeps us afloat. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Michelle's harrowing escape. Finally, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this shocking conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second, join our community today.